Selamat datang ke ASM Podcast yang dibawakan khas oleh Akademi Sains Malaysia. Siri podcast ini merupakan platform perkongsian topik-topik berkaitan sains, teknologi, inovasi dan ekonomi STIE secara santai dan mudah difahami. Setiap episod akan menampilkan jaringan pakar ASM yang akan berkongsi pengalaman dan pendapat mereka tentang STIE seiring dengan etos ASM. Budayakan sains, raikan teknologi, cetuskan inovasi.
Assalamualaikum and good day. Welcome to the ASM Podcast. My name is Hani, your host for today. On today's episode, we will talk about the Malaysia Open Science Platform, MOSP. MOSP is a research data sharing platform that aims to increase access to research data and scientific knowledge. MOSP is an initiative by the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, MOSTI, and is managed by the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. Open science is the practice of making scientific knowledge more accessible to reduce the gap of knowledge by sharing it with the public. The practice adopts the international principle of making scientific knowledge findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, FAIR. On 16th May 2023, the Malaysia Open Science Platform, MOSP, was officially launched by the Deputy Prime Minister Yang Amat Berhormat Datuk Seri Haji Fadilah Haji Yusof. Since the launch, and even before that, whenever we are talking about open science in Malaysia, researchers especially has been asking a few interesting questions. Today, we have together in the studio an expert in open science to answer these questions. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Zulfadli Hafiz Ismail, a public health medicine specialist from the National Institute of Health, Ministry of Health. Welcome, Dr. Fadli, to this episode of ASM Podcast. Before we begin, can you please tell our audience a little bit about your education background and research expertise?
Thank you, Hani. So first of all, I would like to thank ASM for having me here today. Looking at the list of distinguished speakers in this podcast series, I'm very honored to be part of this program. So basically, in terms of my background, like you mentioned, my name is Fadli. I'm a public health medicine specialist, currently working in NIH Malaysia. So I actually graduated from Barts and London in 2010 for my medical degree in London. And then I did my housemanship in Hospital Ampang from 2010 until 2012 before I moved to Terengganu in the Hospital Sultanah Nur Zahirah, mainly in the anesthesiology and ICU department. End of 2014, I moved to Institute for Health Systems Research, which is one of the institutes under NIH. Then I was exposed to and been groomed into the field of implementation science and knowledge translation, a discipline that looks into how we can translate evidence into practice. And as you can imagine, the fundamental aspect of that discipline is about how we can access data and how we can churn those data into tangible and digestible output for the policymakers. So, as you can imagine, I'm very much exposed to the concept of open science even back then. 2016, I did my postgrad studies in University of Malaya for my master's and doctorate of public health, and I graduated in 2020. And end of 2020, I joined back NIH, and currently I'm under the Sector for Biostatistics and Data Repository, and I'm heading the Methodology and Data Analysis Unit. And currently, there are two major initiatives that I'm working on. I'm the focal team that developed the NIH Data Repository system, the platform that curates all primary research data produced in the Ministry of Health. And it was launched back in April 2022. And another initiative that I'm currently working is I'm also part of the focal team in developing the big data analytics ecosystem for research for NIH. And as you can imagine, it is a very data-driven kind of discipline, which is why open science is very much close to my heart, and I'm very excited to share my experience with the audience out there.
So hopefully Doctor can help us to answer all these questions from the researchers. Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Moving to our topic today, although open science is actually not a new movement and sharing research finding is common in Malaysia, but people are still asking, what is open science? Can Dr. help to enlighten us on what is this, and can you elaborate more on your experience in open science?
Yeah. So thanks, Hani. So basically, like you said, open science is not a new discipline, if you like. It has been here for quite some time. So there are a lot of definitions on open science. So open science is a concept or a discipline that emphasizes on the fact that we need to ensure that the research products, be it data, be it information or knowledge, are accessible and reusable for maximum utilization of those research products. That is the fundamental definition of open science. But for that to happen, you need cooperation from the whole research community, not only from the researchers, but we're talking about the funders and other stakeholders, including public, right? And the movement of open science begins even throughout the whole research life cycle, if you like, from the conception of idea, how do you plan in terms of data management, data collection, all the way in dissemination your research findings. And last but not least, this definition and movement has to be leveraged by technology. So the discipline of open science consists of three major core business, if you like. One, as you can imagine, is accessibility. Access to data, access to literature, and public participation in order to benefit from the open science movement. Core business number two is on the infrastructure. You need to have the right infrastructure to ensure that data can be shared, information can be shared, and can be utilized by others. And last but not least, open science also emphasizes on the aspect of measuring impact beyond the scientific community. And we can elaborate that later on. So having this open science movement, if we zoom in into Malaysia, right? Malaysia has accelerated the process of open science. For example, MOSTI has already launched what is known as the Malaysian Open Science Platform Initiative back in 2019, spearheaded by the Malaysian Open Science Alliance that consists of members from different ministries and agencies and research universities. And then this movement is facilitated by Academy of Sciences Malaysia. And there are three major areas that MOSP initiative is looking into, right? Number one is on the capacity building aspect. We've conducted a lot of training series involving a lot of entities and agencies, and up to date, about 242 data stewards were produced. And I'm proud to say that I'm one of the products. Number two is on the landscape and guideline policy. So under the MOSP initiative, we are working hard to come up with a national guideline that can be used by others in terms of research data sharing in Malaysia as a guidance. And number three, last but not least, is the platform itself, which, like you mentioned, has been launched on the 16th of May 2023 by our Deputy Prime Minister, Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Haji Fadilah Haji Yusof, which consists of, it's a platform that enables us to connect to individual data repositories produced all over Malaysia from the research community. To date, we have about 8 databases with 1,000 plus data sets for us to utilize under the spirit of open science. If we zoom in into NIH, how we came about formally with this open science movement, it stemmed from our development of NIH data repository. Back in 2020, when we developed that platform, we quickly realized that we need expertise and guidance from those already engaged or involved in open science. This is when we connect with ASM, and we underwent a few training sessions. And throughout the development, we continue to get guidance from ASM. And as a result, NIH thus is built on the principle of open science, using the FAIR principle as our core guidance in the development. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, being in NIH and handling medical data and embarking on the open science journey must have been quite an experience, because like medical research, or like somehow people say sensitive. So what are like the reactions from your stakeholders when you firstly said that we want to go on this journey? And how did you convince all the stakeholders that it is good to go for open science, and what are the benefits of doing this?
Yeah. So before I delve into the reactions of the stakeholders, perhaps it's best for me to give a snippet of what the structure of NIH is like and how the structure actually facilitates open science. So NIH consists of 6 research institutes covering different aspects of health research, from basic research all the way to health systems, if you like. And to support the research activities, we have 2 other divisions. One is Office of NIH Manager, in which the sectors under this Office of NIH Manager actually mirrors the research life cycle. And we also have the Office of Registrar that looks into the administrative aspect. Because of this structure, which underwent a restructuring back in 2019, one of the sectors that's been conceived is actually my sector that I'm working at the moment, the sector for biostatistics and data repository, which became the focal entity to drive open science together with other sectors in Office of NIH Manager. So from the organization structure point of view, the template is there. The facilitator aspect is there from the structure. But like you correctly mentioned, medical research data is a tricky one as far as open science is concerned because of 2 things. One is sensitive. Imagine if those information leaked out for some reason, right? It can create havoc to the person who is involved, right? Disadvantage to the person, for example, in their career and so on. Another aspect of medical research that makes it tricky is because how diverse it is. From the molecular aspect, you can have your genomics, you can have your biomarkers, you can have your clinical findings, you can have audio recordings, images, and so on. So this sensitivity and diverse characteristics of medical research data make the open science more challenging and interesting to us. And this is when NIH has been conceived to tackle all these issues, again, using the open science principle. So that is in terms of the medical research data's nature. Now, but the most important thing for us to accelerate NIH in embracing open science is the people itself, right? This is when we identify 2 major stakeholders. Number 1 is our directors and the senior research officers. And number 2 are the researchers themselves. For us to get the buy-in from them, we did a lot of engagement sessions through high-level meetings, roadshows, and so forth, right? And every time we engage with them, we consistently mention these 3 major points. Number 1, open science will not make your data vulnerable because we uphold the concept of as open as possible and as close as necessary, right? Taking into account the nature of the medical research data, sensitivity, and so on. Yet, at the same time, we want people to utilize the data as much as possible. Number 2, we emphasize on the concept of the role of researchers as data curators and the importance of data owners as well. As data curators, their main role is to produce data, right? To benefit the data owner's return of value. This is when it's important for us to share the data as data creators to ensure that the investment that data owners have put in can be maximized. And number 3, we also emphasize the fact that this open science movement also take into account in terms of balancing the interests of the researchers and the data owners. Because we understand, as researchers, myself, you've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in producing those data. So we need to keep their interest intact as well. And what are the products of all this engagement, right? Number 1, at the top level point of view, we managed to introduce as part of the policy, whereby for those who obtain Ministry of Health grant, research grant, they have to sign an agreement in which we've added a clause to say that after 1 year of completing their project, they have to park their data or deposit their data in NIH DAS or any other established repositories. Number 1. Number 2, to protect the interests of researchers, we've also agreed to have an embargo period. After completing your study, You have 1 year to give you a head start, for example, to utilize your data for publications and so on, right? And from our side, we did a proactive approach whereby we got a list of researchers from 2014 in which we engaged with individual principal investigators to guide them on the importance of open science and how to deposit their data to be reused by others.
Mm-hmm. So would you say NIH has found the magic formula of having the interest of both parties, the data owners and researchers, to have their support on open science?
Yeah. That's an interesting remark there, Hani. So in terms of getting the magic formula, yes, I think, and I strongly believe that we are moving towards that, but it's not yet optimum, right? Reason I'm saying so is because we also at the moment doing a continuous evaluation to understand the landscape of the acceptance of open science among NIH family members. And what we found out is that in terms of the attitude on open science, generally and intuitively, I suppose, people agree on the benefit of open science in terms of data sharing and so on. But in terms of the practice or the practical aspect of actually doing those open science activities, some sections still have that hesitancy, if you like. And this gap, I strongly believe, is because of our effort from Sector for Biostats and others in this open science movement in terms of creating that awareness and data culture. I think the more people are familiar with that concept, inshallah we'll be able to reduce the gap, and probably then I can safely say that we have found that magic formula, if you like. Yeah.
Okay. And also I would like to note the one thing that you mentioned earlier, as open as possible and as close as necessary. That is like the motto that open science are holding on to now.
Right, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. And in your opinion, Doctor, what are some of the main challenges of sharing research data across all the fields?
Yeah. So obviously, open science has a lot of challenge in ensuring people actually share their data. For me to dissect the challenges, I would like to draw upon this concept, what is known as data strategy. Mm-hmm. Data strategy is a concept whereby an organization or entity strongly believe that data is the most important, most valuable asset, right? So once they have buy-in into that principle, if you like, or that concept, then you can see that data sharing will flourish, okay? But for that to happen, there are 5 pain points that we have to identify as far as data strategy is concerned, which again can be translated into the challenges in sharing data. Number 1, acquisition of data, right? First of all, we need to identify data sources. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of data sources out there from different systems and so on. And each data source has their own unique governance. So that's a huge challenge for us to overcome. Number 2, in terms of governance itself, to ensure that the data of highest quality and security, right? And these two, data acquisition and data governance, can be overcome by having a bird's eye kind of governance structure, right? Perhaps, and it has been suggested that each ministry, for example, within the government, has their own focal point in terms of the chief information officers. So the idea is for us to streamline all the CIOs to work together, and perhaps ASM can use this as an opportunity to bring this open science movement closer. Number 3 is on the infrastructure itself. For open science to happen, for data sharing to happen, you need to have the right infrastructure to link those data sources. And one concept that people are moving into is what is known as demand-driven data linkage. Rather than having one repository or one data warehouse to park every data, everyone can have their own data repository, yet when it needs to be linked, it can be linked seamlessly. So that is what we are aiming for, and that is another challenge we have to overcome. Number 4 is on the data culture and competencies. Yes, again, you need the people to move this around, right? For them to understand the importance of open science and the need for open science in their daily activities. And last but not least, we have to ensure that those data can be turned into insight in a timely and digestible manner so that people can see again the benefit of open science. So if you can overcome these 5 pain points, then inshallah the data sharing will then flourish and accelerate like nobody's business.
Yeah, it all comes back to culture, like who wants to lead the way and who wants to follow. Okay. Then, how do we encourage the participation from the public, industry, funders, and other open science stakeholders so that we can harvest the full potential of open science?
Yeah. So basically, how do we want to get the buy-in from all these different stakeholders? Say yes, open science is the way forward, right? And you rightly mentioned there that first of all, we have to understand what are the benefits of open science. All right. Open science, the end product of open science is what is known as data democratization, whereby everyone can have access to data and utilize it to their needs and potential, right? So, for me to elaborate this, I would like to give a picture based on 2 scenarios. Okay, so for one is from the researcher's point of view. Let's say I'm a researcher doing a study looking at the lifestyle changes that are needed to control diabetes in a population, right? Once I've come up with the data, with the study, I come up with the data, I put it in a repository, right? By putting it there, it can spark innovation, right? It's a powerful driver for open science. First of all, those data can enhance the diversity of its usage. For example, tech startups can use those data to come up with mobile apps to encourage a healthy lifestyle. Educators can use it for their medical and nursing materials, right? Artists, in fact, can use those data for them to tailor to come up with videos, their awareness, short films, and so on how to control diabetes from the lifestyle perspective. Number 2 is it fuels new insights. I can analyze one angle, but a data analyst can analyze using machine learning, for example. Health educators can analyze using their behavioral theories and so on, right? And last but not least, it increases your transparency and it adds credibility to the researcher that has already parked their data there. So you can immediately see that once you embrace open science, it accelerates the utilization of all this research data, right? But the benefits need to be fed back to the researchers, the data creators, and the data funders. How so? This is when we can come up with a few metrics, for example, data citation, so that you can keep track who are using your data. We have all metrics to understand the impact of these research data beyond scientific community. How many shares, how many downloads, for example, how many of these data has been mentioned in news, blogs, in policy development, and so on. So by giving this feedback, then people will then appreciate, oh, this is what happened if I share my data. And that will accelerate in terms of the embracement of open science among researchers. Second scenario is from the public's perspective. So if you are familiar with the concept of citizen science project, whereby it involves participations of public in a research-based project. For example, going back to the lifestyle changes again among diabetes, right? So let's say there's a group of researchers come out with a citizen science project to encourage public to upload their pictures of their meals, for example, and their physical activities, right? And this data can then be harvested by these researchers, turn that into insight, and can be fed back to the local municipal, for example. These local municipals will then be able to use this evidence to propose for new recreational park, for example, come up with incentive or initiative for local farmers to produce or to sell local goods at a more affordable price and so on, right? And every time these initiatives happen, you can always mention that this is part of the citizen science project. So public will say, oh, I've actually contributed to this. And then you can get the buy-in from the public as well. So in a nutshell, the benefits, first of all, we need to understand the benefits of open science, but more importantly, we need to have that conscious feedback mechanism for people to appreciate why they have to embrace open science.
from what I see, it's like we are bridging the gap and we are also connecting the dots.
Exactly.
Yeah, we are closing the loop.
Correct.
From
Exactly.
researchers to public and public to researchers. Yes.
Spot on. Yeah.
Yes. All right. In 5 years, what do you imagine the open science landscape and research data sharing generally and specifically in your field?
Yeah. So we can see that the open science movement is gaining momentum, right? And once it has matured, which I strongly believe in 5 years' time, it can happen. There will be more comprehensive data sharing practices because we have the right infrastructure, we have the right governance, so the borders are becoming less and less obvious, if you like. And because of that, it leads to interdisciplinary collaboration, which gives you a richer insight of a particular issue. Okay? And I strongly believe through open science, when it has matured in 5 years' time, there will be more increased public participation. And like you said, once all this happens, it will close the loop and will involve everyone, and everyone will benefit on the open science. From the medical field, right, if we zoom in, what will happen is that those disciplines that require data, these data-hungry or data-driven disciplines, for example, precision medicine, will flourish. Because of precision medicine's advancement, then we can tailor in terms of the treatment for a particular individual based on their genetics, environment, lifestyle, and we can come up with a better patient outcome in that sense. Number two, it also helps to enhance our public health precision movement as well. Gone are the days when COVID, we have to do a blanket total lockdown. When there's a COVID 2.0, 3.0, 10 years down the road, for example, through open science, we can then have a more tailored public health interventions, which will benefit the economy and so on. And overall, because of this, the patient outcomes will definitely improve in 5 years' time, thanks to open science, because it can lead to greater transparency, increased collaboration, and advancements in all this precision medicine and public health. So yes, the future is bright, and we can see that the seed has been planted. It's now about sowing and making sure that this open science plant will continue to grow and flourish. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fadli, on that. Members of the audience, we have come to the end of the podcast episode. I would like to thank Dr. Fadli for joining us today to answer some of your burning questions on open science. And it is not too late to congratulate Dr. Fadli for being one of our top data stewards under the Data Stewardship Training on Open Science. For our listeners, I hope this session has been beneficial, and please visit the MOSP platform at mosp.gov.my and follow us for the latest updates on open science on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MOSP_Malaysia. I am Hani. Assalamualaikum and have a good day.